Hello, if you're just joining us, we are in our tech 15-minute period here where you can work out any issues you might have with Zoom. Let us know if you have any questions. Amelia and I can do our best to answer them and resolve them rather quickly. And we will be starting at 12:45.
Thank you.
Hey, Shelley, this is David. Do you want us to have video or there's no video? Okay.
Well, so my thinking is that if you're speaking, please turn on your video. We might only see you as a small little window, but you know, if we can have the people speaking, bring up the video, and then if you're not speaking, you're free to turn off your video. If you're comfortable with it on, you're worried about tech issues, you know, we're patient to that as well, but we are recording this. And so, you know, it's your call, and it has a bandwidth effect, you know, for some people. And I think that overall you could probably leave it off if you want. And if you have a question, you can speak up by raising your hand. And there's more, I think we mentioned that again later. There's a little rotating presentation playing right now that has some tips on using Zoom. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. So when presenting, I'll use video. When not, will not.
Sure.
Same here.
Talking, you can as well. You can use your video if you just have a question. You're welcome to do that. I don't have my video on yet, but I will put it on at 12:45.
Hi, Shelley. This is Jeff Neal from NCT COG, just checking in to see if you're seeing video and hearing me.
Yes, I can see and hear you, Jeff. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Same here. Ken Perrine from Center for Transportation Research. Just want to do an audio video check.
Hi, Ken. We read you loud and clear and see you.
Great. Thank you.
Hey, Millie Hayes doing an audio video check as well.
There you are. Haven't seen you in a minute, Millie. How are you doing?
Great. Thank you, my friend.
Hello, if you're just joining us, we will be starting at 12:45. I recommend taking this time just to make sure your technology is working as you expect it to be. And if you have any questions, please let Amelia or myself know, and we will try to work through it quickly for you. Hello, good afternoon. This is Shelley Pridgeon, and we will be beginning the meeting in about 2 minutes. So consider this your 2-minute warning. Good afternoon. I hope everyone has all of their technology in order. We allowed that 15 minutes just to try to prevent some of the issues that typically arise in these situations. Amelia, if you'll put it on the first slide, that would be awesome. Thank you for having that rotating Zoom guidance. I think that was probably helpful for some. All right, so welcome to our 12th STIC meeting. And thank you for joining. It looks like we have a good turnout today. I just wanted to start out with a couple of quick comments. And first, let me just say, this morning I was watching the Nobel Prize Summit, and it's very inspiring. And I just wanted to mention that they're talking a lot about transportation technology and, you know, thinking locally and globally at the same time. So, you know, I think this group is a good outlet to try and find a way to work together across the state. And I think we can always do better. And I'm so glad that so many people have shown interest this year, and we've had a lot of participation, and I appreciate that. And the goal of today's meeting is just going to be basically to tell y'all what we've been doing with the Everyday Count 6 as far as where we are now. It's kind of a status update, and then just to think about those things that are priorities for us now, and then how we can continue to enhance and improve upon what we're doing in those areas. And so with that in mind, I would like to, let's see, if we can get the slides going. I think, Amelia, I'm not seeing the slides, but that's okay. It's just introductory slides, I'll just say. So I'm Shelley Pridgeon. I'm with the TxSTIC Research Division. I'm here on behalf of the research division, and also Kevin Pete and Darren Anderson, and they will both be welcoming you shortly. And I think we're a couple minutes ahead, but once we get the slides going, we'll go ahead and pull up Kevin's slide. I can't see the slides, Amelia. I don't know if you can pop those up. Is anyone else seeing the slides? I'm just seeing the participants.
I don't see them, Shelley.
Okay. Amelia, are you there? Did we lose her? Let's see her on the list here. Oh, there she is. Okay. Uh-oh. Let's see, somebody can't hear us. Okay, so let me see if I can get her to run the slides. All All right, so let's go ahead and move on to Kevin. Kevin, if you're here with us, please feel free to speak up and say hi to everyone. I
Hi,
see.
Shelley. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can see and hear you.
Great. I just wanted to follow up with behind Shelley here and welcome everybody back to our STIC meeting. I know we previously planned something earlier, maybe a month or so ago, that this meeting would occur, but we're here now, and I'm glad we're here to make the most of it. In addition to that, it's been a while since we've met, since November, I think was the last time we've met, and there's a number of things that have occurred. You guys have had an opportunity to caucus around the Everyday Counts event that happened early towards the end of last year as well. And so there's some results that came out of that and some items from EDC 6 that you guys, I think, kind of would like to see more happen within the state as well. So those things will be discussed a little bit later as we move through the agenda. Regarding research, since we've met, there's been about 280 problems or ideas that were submitted to our research division here, some innovative ideas that the research committees within TxSTIC have gone through and vetted. And of that 284, they've actually identified 36 new projects that we're looking to get started within the next fiscal year, FY22. That'd be September 1st timeframe. Anytime after that, we would start these projects. And those are some pretty, really good projects that they've identified that will benefit a lot of the districts, a lot of the problems that are occurring in our state that will help resolve those, maybe not immediately this year, but hopefully within the next year or two. And as well as benefit some of the other DOTs out there that may need some of the problems or have some problems that they need to resolve by these innovative research ideas. In addition to that, we have probably about 40 projects that will be closing in this fiscal year by August 31st. And what we plan to do is to engage you guys in taking a look at least those closeouts and make a determination of, of which ones would be of interest to you prior to our next STIC meeting. And so we'd like to offer that up to you and share that with you, and hopefully you can review those. Shelley will provide that out to you guys. And if there's something out there that's of benefit, of interest to you, then we definitely want to share the results of those projects with you as well. Outside of that, there's one that I'd like to mention. There's a transportation pool fund study that we currently are seeking approval from FHWA for. And I don't know about any of you other committees out here, if they have ever participated in any of those. But I believe that it's open, and Kirk Farver probably could chime in, provide more information to that if you have some interest in that as well. But that topic is related to the development and evaluation of roadside safety systems for motorcyclists. And typically that's a huge safety area out there on the roadways, where a lot of our roadside guardrails and barriers are associated for our motorists who are driving, making sure that they're safe. But our vulnerable folks are the ones on motorcycles. So that's specifically what that transportation pool fund study is about, and we're hoping that we get a few other states on board to participate in that as well. So outside of that, that's been pretty much it for me. I'm going to turn it over and get out of you guys' way and hand it back over to Shelley. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. We still have a couple minutes, and I just wanted to mention something else that stood out to me regarding that Nobel Prize Summit and some of the things that are going on with pool fund studies and whatnot. We do have a lot of interest in sharing innovation these days. And I know a lot of us have done that within our organizations, or perhaps you've seen that done at another organization. I know DOTs across the nation are also finding ways to share internally, but what they're trying to do now is focus on that external sharing. And of course, that goes back to the theme, I think, of, trying to share between our local and regional and state agencies, latest innovations and things that we're doing that can make everyone's lives better. And so I just wanted to mention that, since Kevin brought up pool fund studies. And with that, that's all I really have to say at the moment. And I'd like to hear what Darren has to say, so we can, if you don't mind going a little early, Darren, you've got a couple more minutes.
Oh, it's fine. So thanks for everybody joining us today, and really looking forward to hearing the progress of some of these Everyday Counts initiatives. Just some things that are going on in addition to that. So I was thinking about a number of activities at the federal level. You know, Congress is full swing, and so is our state legislature. And at the federal level, there's obviously a number of infrastructure bill developments underway. We are engaged, through our partner organizations like AASHTO, as well as ITS America, on reviewing anything that comes out and providing input through those elements to, what we think are beneficial opportunities, as well as, considerations that they may have as they develop those in staff. And it ranges from, intelligent transportation systems to broadband. There's actually an autonomous vehicle bill now in development, kind of a revisit of efforts a few years back. So a lot of interesting developments there, a lot of opportunity for study and innovation across, all aspects and disciplines of transportation and what's happening in potentially the future infrastructure bill. And we'll continue to review those, and as we know more about them as they shape up, we'll try to put that information out through several channels as to what it looks like. You can't ever guarantee anything until it's actually signed and approved, right? But there's quite a bit of development there. Same thing in state legislature. There's several bills related to either research or innovation. There's a few studies in there that are so far making their way through committee process. There's certainly a broadband bill there. Urban air mobility is of interest, as well as unmanned aerial systems and how we might manage those in the future. And also several bills on electrification and alternate fuels. So a number of new developments that traditionally haven't been in previous sessions, at least in the time that I've been here. And it doesn't mean that all of them will go through, but it points to people are thinking about some of these things and thinking about what they may mean for the state of Texas, and then more broadly, how we fit into the national structure. And we'll see where they go. We'll see what happens in terms of what is finally approved and voted on. But still valuable to know about and valuable for us to be aware of, not only in TxSTIC, but in the transportation elements in the state as a whole, and what those may mean in the future as they continue to develop. Kevin mentioned the research projects. The only thing I'd add to that is we're deep into the proposal submission timeline. I think that the intent is to select the appropriate awardees by the mid-May timeframe. Is typically where we try to be. And really a great spread across all of our traditional areas of research and materials, bridges, construction, as well as innovative projects. And so I thought that we had a number of great submissions, and it was really difficult to kind of narrow those down to the ones that we could actually resource. But I'm really pleased with the total that we're able to do, as well as the ones that were selected. I think it's really going to help benefit the department, as well as all of you as well. I'll reiterate the safety concerns. Kevin mentioned the motorcycle piece. We just reviewed, we review every few months our data on fatalities and serious injuries. And certainly there was an uptick in fatalities this last year. A lot of them are speed related. While we saw a decrease last year and we continue to see a trending decrease in DUIs, we've certainly seen an increase in speeding and speed related accidents that have been of concern, and also pedestrian fatalities, which make up a significant number or significant percentage of the overall fatalities on our system last year. So it's certainly a growing area of concern, not only in Texas, but in other states, is how we might address those. And I expect research to continue to look at those as well. I guess the final one is strategic planning is involved in, kind of a roadshow with our districts on on connected and autonomous vehicles, and we're trying to improve our knowledge there as we see a number of activities in the state related to those and continued development in the industry. And certainly, again, there it's I want to bring in the research community to those to assess public understanding, public buy-in, as well as the safety and the cybersecurity and the actual effectiveness of those type of activities in our state. Again, really looking forward to this. One other one, Shelley kind of alluded to it. Kevin's been working in our last STIC meeting. We brought in some innovative projects or ideas from other states, and we're looking to re-energize that within TxSTIC. We had a program several years back, but we kind of fell off, I guess. And so we're working between the two divisions and with the rest of the department to establish a program to collect those innovations that are happening every day in the field and share those more broadly, not only across all of TxSTIC, but again, to bring it to the STIC, to bring it to all of our transportation partner members, and just make you aware of things that people are thinking of that make everyday work as it relates to delivering, constructing, designing, whatever it may be in mobility, in a more efficient or just a unique way of doing it. And so I'm really looking forward to revamping that and getting that off the ground, and then continue to look at the other states and bring in what Federal Highways is doing in their innovation program to bring that information back to us as well, because there's a lot of great thinking and a lot of very practical solutions out there every day that we don't want to lose sight of. And I think that's going to be really effective and beneficial for the STIC as well as, many in the department. Those are all my top updates, and I'm available for questions at the end or now if anybody has a specific question about any of them, but otherwise I'll turn it back over.
Thank you, Darren. That was very informative, and hopefully if it does trigger any questions and you don't want to speak up in the middle of the process, you're welcome to chat it to us and just chat to everyone, and we can point those out as appropriate. We will have a question point later on if something comes to mind, and then of course Darren will close out the actual meeting as well at the end. So thank you again, Darren. Next up is Al Alonzi. Al, if you're ready, please feel free to update us on your activities.
Great, I am. Good afternoon. Thank you. Can you all hear me okay?
We can hear you and see you. Thank you.
Great. Appreciated your comments, Darren. And I would certainly say that from our kind of unique perch at a national perspective, we are more than willing to help you at least identify what all the other states are doing, and then y'all can pick and choose what might be most appropriate for use here in Texas. Also, following up on your comments about the infrastructure bill. So we have a couple of different pieces operating independently, and I wanted to make sure that point was clear. So we have the American Jobs Plan, which is the $2.5 trillion bill that broadly defines infrastructure. And then we also have the new Surface Transportation Authorization Bill process, because the FAST Act, which was extended until the end of September of this year, is up for renewal. And so that's a separate process and additional funding on top of the $2.5 trillion that is at least the administration's proposal. We know that that the Senate or the GOP, I guess, presented its own version of an infrastructure specific plan, which is significantly less than the president's proposal. However, again, it is focused on infrastructure, and it is separate and apart from our highway bill, which for FHWA is generally 42 to 45 plus $1 billion per year. So I guess the point is there's going to be a massive influx of dollars across the country to spark the economy, but with a lot of focus on what it is everyone on this call does on a day-to-day basis. Darren, you also talked about safety, and it was very timely because what I really want to focus my comments on was this week. This week we are in National Work Zone Safety Awareness Week. And you know, the safety of all of the workers and the traveling public has never been more critical. The last year for which we have national data was in 2019, and there were 842 fatalities in work zones in that year, which was more than at any other time since 2006. And you know, these deaths are unacceptable and preventable. And as you mentioned, even with less traffic during the pandemic, here in Texas, work zone fatalities increased by 9% in 2020. That was 22,000 plus traffic crashes in our work zones, with 147 motorists and passengers that were killed, along with 35 pedestrians and bicyclists and 4 road workers. In fact, just yesterday I read that a Patton Village officer and a TxSTIC worker were hospitalized after being hit by a car on Katy Freeway. So, you know, all of these incidents remind us about how precious life is. So this week, FHWA is joining state DOTs and the rest of the highway community in reminding the traveling public to use caution, to slow down, avoid distractions, and stay alert, especially when you're driving through work zones. The theme for this year's Awareness Week, which is the 26th through the 30th, so every day this week, is drive safe, work safe, save lives. On Wednesday, the 28th, I hope you will join countless others for National Go Orange Day by wearing orange in support of highway workers across the country. This part of Work Zone Awareness Week is fast becoming a highlight of our annual week-long highway safety observance. So I invite you to take a photo of yourself or your office if you happen to be back in the office, or on a Teams call, take a snapshot of everyone wearing orange and post a photo of it to your own Twitter account. And if you would, please use the hashtag orange, the number 4, and the word safety, and tag FHWA and USDOT at, I'll put it in the chat pod so everyone can see. I invite you to do that. I know most of FHWA division offices do that, and it's getting, again, more and more hits and more popular each year. Let me jump back into funding, because in the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021, there was $1 billion, a billion with a B, that was announced. It's a discretionary program. Used to be known as Tiger, then it was Build, and now it's rebranded as RAISE, the Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity, RAISE. So it's a $1 billion discretionary funding grant awarded on a competitive basis for planning and capital projects. The notice of funding opportunity is available on the RAISE website, and I'll put that in the chat pod after I'm done talking so that everyone can click on a link and see where you might be able to access additional funds. Application deadline is July 12th. One more item to talk about in terms of funding, and that is STIC incentive funding. So those funding requests are due by August 7th. So it's an opportunity for us as a group, should we choose to move forward with it, to kind of brainstorm how we could institutionalize or build a culture of innovation in Texas using this incentive funding grant of $100,000. And Kirk will be our point of contact here for FHWA, happy to work with anyone. If the group wants to do it, we're happy to help do what it is that we can. Those are my updates. I know Kirk is on the agenda a little bit later on. And so, Shelley, I will pass it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Al. That was very informative. I was not aware of some of the things you mentioned, and I didn't know that y'all were doing that on Twitter. What a great idea. And hopefully that will continue to, elicit more interest and, people being aware of it. And I cannot believe some of the figures you've said. I knew of some of them, but the update was helpful. So today, my goal in my 5-minute stint here is just to quickly discuss what we did. Oh, sorry. The last time we met in January 11th, we had our caucus that Kevin mentioned earlier. It was for the purpose of the state of Texas to determine which of the Everyday Counts 6 innovations that we wanted to support, just to see where the interest was and what type of things we were really putting as priority this year. Can you go to the next slide, please, Amelia? So if you'll recall, during our meeting on January 11th, if you were present, it was just a few of us, but what we had was this poll, the audience questionnaire, where we were trying to just get just a number just to see. And this was just a basic idea we were looking for, just to give us some clue as to where we might be heading. You can go ahead and go to the next slide, please. Okay. And the interesting thing here was that, a lot of these things hashed out as interest, I can't speak, sorry. Interesting. So a lot of people are interested in a lot of these topics, but we did have the 3 rise to the top that you might expect with the technology that we're starting to see and the emphasis on technology and transportation. So next gen TIM rose to the top in this case. And then we had crowdsourcing for advancing operations, which is the next leg of crowdsourcing, as we had one in Everyday Counts 5, and then strategic workforce development. And my goal for the meeting today was to bring all of these up and let you know what we're doing right now with some of these innovations in the state of Texas. And so you might have noticed on the agenda that we have the 3 of these kind of, floating to the top. Now, the thing about Next Gen TIM is it sort of overlaps crowdsourcing for advancing operations, and the STIC has actually done a good job of some of these things already, as you might recall from some of the presentations we've had in past meetings. So talking about TIM and whatnot. And so these are very important driving factors for this group. And so next slide, please. We did an additional survey, and this was the follow-up survey after the caucus, where I gave everyone an opportunity to give their input to gather this idea of where everything actually rose to the top and have specific details as to why they were important to the members. And so the follow-up survey results were similar, but just switched order. And so strategic workforce development rose to the top in this case, and the second highest being TIM, and then the third being crowdsourcing for advancing operations. And so the interesting thing here is that we still have the top 3, and that didn't really deviate very much, but we were able to get an idea of where everyone wanted to go this year and what type of things that we could use help from the FHWA on. And they help with their Everyday Counts teams. They help us to engage our state and to have activities. And Kirk, of course, might mention that again, some of the things that they're going to do to support us in these efforts. Next slide, please. So just to give the breakdown of what we were seeing, it's actually pretty close when we're looking at the most important innovation to everyone who participated. The strategic workforce development was at the top, but look how close Next Gen TIM, and then we had targeted overlay and crowdsourcing tied at 5, but also keep in mind that we had just done crowdsourcing. We were not fully implemented yet at the end of 2020, but we're very close, and we are where we anticipated or expected to be at this stage. And so everything's going well with that. And this is an opportunity to continue to move forward with crowdsourcing for advancing operations. So that is another reason that will be carried forward. But today in our agenda, we have Texas LTAP. Ray Belk is going to give us an update on this project that we're doing related to STIC, and he can give you the full details on that. But before that, I would like for Kirk, if you're ready, to go ahead and begin your discussion of where we are going from here. So what do we do now that we've identified top projects? And we are doing more than just those top 3, but those are just the top 3 that we know there is interest in. And again, thank you, Kirk. Please feel free to begin.
Thank you, Shelley. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to give you an update on EDC 6, round 6 activities in the state of Texas following the survey that Shelley mentioned. And next slide, please. One of our missions is to facilitate the rapid implementation of innovative technology. Darren mentioned that earlier. Our vision is to foster a collaborative culture for rapid implementation of technologies. And the goal of the STIC is to provide a forum for transportation leadership to initiate those innovations that best align to the state of Texas. And we're going to discuss and respond to some of these key issues and challenges that impact the transportation system. Next slide. So for some of you who are new, in 2010, we implemented the Everyday Counts initiative to shorten project delivery and expedite the deployment of proven technologies, save time, save lives, save money. We introduced state DOTs and industry partners as a process to facilitate the EDC initiatives, and we've had 6 rounds of EDC initiatives since FY10. Next slide. Some of the ones that Shelley mentioned were the ones that floated to the top were crowdsourcing for advancing operations, and that includes the crowdsourced data that can be used to identify where people travel, allowing agencies to capture real time what happens between sensors in rural regions, along arterials, urban areas. Agencies at all levels can use crowdsourced data to help improve safety, reliability of the transportation system. The other high-ranking survey result was the Next Generation TIM, our Traffic Incident Management Program, that we're going to hear more about later. Aims to shorten the duration and impact of roadway incidents and improve the safety of motorists and crash victims and responders. New tools, data, and training mechanisms are available that can benefit both new and existing TIM programs, including local agency and off interstate applications. Next slide. This is something that Ray Belk is working very hard at in our state of Texas. We're talking about strategic workforce development as one of the high-ranking EDC 6 innovations in our survey. As you know, Texas LTAP has won a STIC incentive award for $100,000 for this area just last year. And it looks at demand for highway construction, maintenance, and operation workers, and looking at emerging technologies that require these workers to have new skills, new resources, innovation, strategies for identifying, training, replacing individuals, and that contractors need necessary workforce to meet the nation's highway system in the 21st century. So that was the STIC Incentive Award that they awarded in September of 2020. Next slide. Virtual public involvement is another high-ranking survey result, and it helps to identify new technologies, can help spread the word about transportation issues like at the metropolitan and statewide levels earlier in the process, which can help accelerate the delivery of projects and plans. Virtual public involvement supplements traditional face-to-face information, which we will do as we move beyond the COVID situation that we're in, the pandemic, and we're going to do more using technology platforms now that increase the number and variety of methods that agencies use to inform the public. Next slide. So these are the contact people for crowdsourcing. These are the people we'll be working with actually over the next year or two. And we've actually had a crowdsource kickoff on the 19th of this month. with those folks, James Collier and Ralph Volpe and their consultants. And so we've already kicked off one meeting with the crowdsourcing for advancing operations. The next generation, Tim, will be following up with a kickoff meeting next month. We haven't set the date for it yet, but we're planning to announce that information to be determined in the next month. Paul Jodon and James Ostrich are the two primary points of contacts that we'll be working with over the next couple of years to advance and deploy the next generation Tim. Next slide. So what we're going to do, the next steps, I don't know if you can read all this, but we're going to work with the subject matter experts that we mentioned earlier to conduct workshops, peer exchanges like we've done in the past, training sessions with the help of Texas Local Technical Assistance Program on each of the 4 selected EDC 6 activities. We're going to look at opportunities to pursue the 100K STIC incentive awards that Al mentioned earlier that come out every year that can be awarded for projects or programs that support EDC 6 through the TxSTIC Research Division. And we're also thinking about the possible use of accelerated innovation deployment aid grants, which go up to $1 million per innovation per state to support major implementation opportunities to deploy ED6, for example, throughout the state of Texas, possibly. And there's more information on, there's a NOFA that's out there that's being developed for this. And I believe they've got, let me see my notes, how many millions of dollars. They've got about $10 million set aside for FY21 for these aid grants, and their allocation is going to be available once we get the notice of funding opportunity, or NOFA, published and sent out to the state DOTs, hopefully in the next month or so. Next slide. These are the aid demonstration projects, the $1 million per project that we've seen across the country. And some states have not applied, haven't taken up the grants, even though there's been $81 million that's been allocated for these awards and 110 projects and 69 innovations. Texas has not yet fielded one or attempted to go after an aid demonstration project yet. Maybe that will change in the future. So next slide. I don't know if we have time for questions right now, Shelley, or do we want to wait? Do we want to wait until later?
No, you can go ahead. I think we're doing well on our time.
Oh, we're doing well on time. Well, just a couple things I wanted to remind everybody about. Those STIC incentive awards, they're due, the proposals are due August 7th. It's a discretionary program, so we can get selected based on Center for Accelerating Innovation ranking. The deadline again is August the 7th. For the STIC Excellence Awards that are due July 6th or July 1st, they're due to Jeff Horowitz and Center for Accelerating Innovation by July the 1st for STIC Excellence Award. We've won one a few years back, as you remember, STIC Excellence Award, I believe in 2018 or 19. So there's an opportunity there for us to apply for it again. For anyone that wants to publish an article or about an innovation that they're pursuing in their at the local level or through TTI, there's opportunities to market your innovation through EDC News, which is a newsletter that comes out monthly, or EDC 5 or EDC Innovation Newsletter. The EDC News, as I mentioned, comes out. And all we need is one paragraph and identifying who's doing what and what the innovation does, who to contact for additional information, and success stories, or looking at best practices that they'd like to share among the country. So that's available. I wanted to announce also that EDC 5, the final report, has been issued as of last week, April, I think that it has a date of April 2021. And that tells you how successful we were with the other states in implementing EDC 5 technologies and innovations. And according to Sarah Lowry of the Center for Accelerating Innovation, we've had 98% of the states meet their goals, their stated goals and performance measures in EDC 5. So that's the highest it's ever been in the history of the program since 2010. And that hats off to people that are working so hard and diligently to implement EDC 5, because during the COVID pandemic, there was a lot of setbacks at research institutions and things like that that may have hindered the implementation of some of the EDC 5 technologies. But regardless of that, we've made 98% across the board, meeting our goals and performance measures related to EDC 5. So congratulations out there to those of you working on EDC 5. And that's about all I had, Shelley. I'd like to turn it back to you. And if there's any questions, I'd be glad to field them at this time. So Shelley, you can take it away.
Thanks. Let's see if anybody has made any comments. Yeah, we're a bit of, don't slow down. So I know that we have, we're a little bit ahead of schedule. I did notice that Al did he posted his chat. And if you want to look there, you can see his link and his hashtag information if you guys want to participate in that. So thank you for posting that in there, Al. And Kirk, thank you for mentioning where we are. And I think that's important just for people to know, like, what is happening now, what happens after we identify, what innovations we want to support in Texas. And a lot of those, we are trying to reach out to regional and local governments and try to include them. And if you have interest, please let us know. You're welcome to email me. I'm sure you can email Kirk as well, but somehow, we'll get that information to Kirk so that he knows who would like to be involved. As those kickoff meetings happen, depending on the situation, we might bring you into the call and you can listen and maybe ask questions. But for the most part, it will be the DOT engaging. So TxSTIC would be the one who would actually handle it, but we can consider your needs and try to do things that might work in conjunction or help an effort that you're doing regionally or locally. So keep that in mind. So with that, I'll let Ken go ahead and speak about one of his projects that he's been keeping us informed on. It's the weather responsive management strategies. It is very interesting, and I appreciate you coming to give us this update, Ken.
Thanks, Shelley. Yes, I'm Ken Perrine from Center for Transportation Research at UT Austin, and it's great that Kirk had updated us on where EDC 5 is going and what opportunities there are with EDC 6. In fact, I'm very interested in perhaps reaching out when we get more results and seeing if we can portray some of our results within the newsletter. So next slide, please. So just a quick recap on the weather project. It's managed with an RTI by Wade Odell, and the advisory committee has been informative on the directions that the project is going. And within UT Austin, Chandra Bhatt is the research manager, Christian Claudel as well, and then a couple of grad students. Next slide, please. One thing I want to call out is that these slides are actually a different rendition than the one that I had. So we're going to see if the slides that I had intended are here. I can just quickly go to my screen if we need to. But just as a recap on what EDC 5 objectives are within the weather project, is to develop a demonstration management strategy, and of course to increase effectiveness and reduce costs, which is really the overall theme that we're seeing within EDC 5 and EDC 6. Next slide, please. Okay, at this junction, if you don't mind, I would like to switch over to my slide deck. I think these are the slides that may have been in the archive. Would that be okay?
Let's go ahead. Amelia can give you the ability to do that. Correct, Amelia?
Yes, I went ahead and made you co-host.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay. My apologies on all this confusion here. So quick update on the project. We've been working on efforts to integrate new data sources that we're collecting from the field within the Abilene region and being able to have them incorporated into the existing workflows that exist already within TxSTIC. We thought that this is very, very important because if we were just to come up with a new scheme that is totally wonderful, innovative, but didn't really factor in the existing practices that those on the roadway exercise when they're treating winter roadway conditions, then we have a risk that there wouldn't really be buy-in. So we want to be very attentive within this project of being able to know what the processes are and to be able to see how can we help those processes in a gradual manner so that we can really find integration and apply it. So one thing that we focused on was looking at what are the current practices and being able to apply brine to roadways as winter weather pre-treatment, and how can we augment that with some kind of automation. So in the pictures on the left or on the right, you see a handwritten brine application spreadsheet. And what we want to do is be able to integrate automatically tracked activity on the roadway that's geographically located and indicates when there is brine application on the roadway. But with that, there's also processes that have to be designed in how do we integrate with the existing resources and how do we also collect information on the roadway so that we understand how the current practices can be sufficiently superseded or enhanced. With that, we're also analyzing winter weather storm data that we had collected this last winter season and seeing how can the other weather station information that we have in our 5 weather stations are deployed within the Abilene district, and also new technology on passive infrared sensing on pavement surface temperature to predict ice formation. How can we have these available in a centralized location in such a way that they're truly useful to traffic operators? And one thing that is especially interesting to us right now is that TxDOT is in the process of currently deploying Texera, which is on the ArcGIS Enterprise platform, really a centralized location where a lot of different data sources are coming into geographically enabled applications. And with that, we want our winter weather treatment activity to show up in that application as well. And we are in conversations to make that happen. Another thing I want to add too is that we have requested a no-cost extension to the project. So rather than the project concluding at the end of, I think the original date was at the end of May, we're concluding at the end of August, which gives us more time to really accommodate some of the delays that we've seen because of COVID-related dependencies. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm controlling the slides. With that, we want to present a webinar targeted around mid-July to traffic operators and anybody else who's interested in understanding the findings that we've had from our project, but also in knowing what are next steps and folks within districts that want to implement their own resources that allow for automatic tracking of winter weather treatment activity. And also we want to present how we also came up with insights on the data that we've had within this last season. We also want to show how can we apply the things that we find about winter weather roadway treatment to other types of weather phenomenon or environmental phenomenon. For example, herbicide application. It turns out that the same technologies used for tracking where spraying activity happens within the Abilene district can also apply to herbicide application. And with that, I want to spread the word and say that anybody who's interested, I'd like to keep them informed on that. And this is my email address, kperrine@utexas.edu. And if you have any interest in keeping informed about the upcoming webinar or have any colleagues that might be interested, please shoot an email my direction. I'll keep you informed. That's all I have. And I invite any questions now, unless we have a unified question answer session at the end of this section.
No, actually, that is where we are. We are at our questions and answer session. So if anybody does have any questions right now, this would be a great time. And the other thing to consider is we are 15 minutes ahead of schedule. And so if we, I'm already asking the next presenter if they want to go sooner, or their originally scheduled was 2:10. And then the other option is we can postpone our break, have the presentation now and then have the break at 10, but we'll see where we are. First, I have a question for you, Ken. I was wondering, so now that we are at this point, this juncture of the project, where do you think you'll be? So by the next STIC meeting, you might have some results to share with us or more?
Yes, certainly. I definitely am excited about the idea that we will have a number of results that we would like to present to the next STIC meeting. If it turns out that our workshop happens beforehand, then I think it'll be a great time to really take the best of the summary and portray it here, and also provide links to the presentation materials. One of the things I want to say about that workshop is we definitely want to articulate the end-to-end workflow solution for being able to have the tracking of winter weather treatment on the roadway that integrates into the Verizon system and also the TxSTIC ArcGIS enterprise system that TxDOT is currently in the process of deploying. If it turns out that our STIC meeting is before the workshop, then it'll be a great opportunity to spread the word some more and see if there's any others that might be able to join in.
That sounds great. And I'm sure, I mean, a lot of people here are probably aware of why a brine application is important and why it is one of the things we are able to do now, and it's relatively inexpensive. And in North Texas, it's a pretty important tool that we use in the winter weather operations, of which we had some pretty severe ones this year. And I don't know, I was thinking you might mention that. Did that affect this project at all, Ken?
I think in terms of delaying some deliverables that we needed from a couple vendors, we were already complicated by COVID. It just seemed to really create just an overall delay on a variety of fronts, but also the time that everything gets completely knocked out for those couple of weeks. It took a while for folks to recover. So I think that was one of the realistic lessons that we had to learn from all this, is that when there is a very severe winter weather incident happening and the power goes out, it's very hard for multiple parties to be able to really collaborate with each other actively. Each person has their own challenges in coming up to speed and online again, and it really does turn into something that has to be managed within a project like this.
Well, I'm actually impressed with your ability to still, you know, the extension is present, but it's also not very far. So, I mean, it's just a few months that you added, and I think it's impressive you will still be at that point by then. We did have some questions that came in on the chat. And so first can you expand a little bit on what TxSTIC is for some that aren't aware?
Yes, and I'm going to be saying things that I've learned from those that are working on TxSTIC, so I may not portray it in the most accurate fashion. So my apologies for that. If anybody else is on the call that could articulate better, then I would invite their comments. But my summary is that it's a very exciting project where TxDOT, this effort is taking multiple data sources, including those from the speed data that usually goes into Lone Star, and Waze data is going into, as far as I know, crash data. All these are being provided in a platform that allows for rapid application development that is very intuitive. It's tied with geographic representations and is creating applications that can allow for more improved querying and correlation of data sources together for incident responses, for different types of operations activities. TxSTIC, as far as my knowledge is an application where a lot of this comes together and really is centered around a map interface that can recall live data streams coming in or historic, and allow for efficient operations that can coincide with, or in some ways improve upon, the functionalities that's offered by the Lone Star ATMS system and other resources that would be available through applications or websites.
Great, thank you for that explanation. And also we had a question about impacts to your equipment, let's see, your instruments. How did they act in the severe cold, or did you notice any major differences?
Yes, one of the problems that we've had consistently is some of the data streams that we collect on our servers were not being collected at critical times because we didn't really have the proper keep alives, I guess is the best term for it, in the applications that pull the data, which goes to show that choosing vendors that have really good backend infrastructures, or having TxSTIC ensure that within their own servers or those that they're contracting with have the safeguards to make sure that those data collection resources are always up and running, is very important. Because if they happen to go down, especially when I'm stuck at home shoveling snow and not able to VPN into our infrastructure that we have here at University of Texas and check to make sure the processes are running, it's very easy to lose track of those data collection efforts that would have ideally been happening. But there is some redundancy, and we are able to retrieve some of the same data from other resources that happen to be supported by some of the vendors of the sensors that we had at the weather stations. But even then, a couple of the vendors for the weather stations are having some ongoing connectivity issues where connectivity happens to be rather slow, and I'm not too sure why. And these are just ongoing IT issues that I would hope that redundancy and attentiveness can, and also just the ability to find more mature technologies, whether it be the sensors that are on the roadway or the back-end infrastructure, letting those technologies mature. I think these are things to look forward to in order to have more robust and reliable data streams.
I agree, that was a good summary.
Yeah, again, I think to summarize the summaries, I think redundancy is the key here.
That was an even quicker summary. We did have some additional comments and supportive information about Texera. Thank you, Joanne and Carl. So check out the chat if you would like to see those. And thank you, Darren, for bringing that up. It is true, you know, everyone might not be aware of what that is, so it helps to have that additional explanation. And so I have heard from our next presenter, David, and you can go ahead and go to the next slide, Amelia. And they are willing to go now. And I was thinking, if as long as there are no objections, we can move on to, you know, we're not skipping the break, but we're moving the presentation up, and then we can perhaps take a break after that, just because of where we are right now. It's only 1:41 and we're a few minutes ahead of schedule. So I recommend we go ahead and move on with traffic incident management with David.
Thank you, Shelley. Good afternoon, everyone. And you know, some of this has already been talked about. This is really in line to EDC 6, our next gen TIM, really taking some of these concepts and pushing them to the arterial roadways, and as well as looking at technologies that can really help us clear our roadways much quicker than what we're currently seeing as we just continue to evolve with technology and whatnot. So if you can go on to the next slide. So this is our outline for today, and I do have some additional speakers that are going to be assisting in this. So Amelia Hayes with FHWA, and then Jeff Kaufman and TTI. They'll come in at the end and go into when we get into the data part. So where are we right now? Go to the next slide. And let's get into the definition first. So this is what the FHWA definition is for traffic incident management, and what TIM is. But really and truly, when you're driving down the roadway and you're surprised, you know, something happened in front of you, whether it's debris in the roadway, a stalled vehicle, in a lane of traffic, on the shoulder, a crash, maybe an officer on a traffic stop, whatever. That's what a traffic incident management is. So why do we want to improve the way we work these things? Because it makes the roadway safe safer for our responders, crash victims, as well as motorists. And it also reduces the duration of impacts of traffic incidents. So next slide. So we're all over Texas. We have all the way from Houston, El Paso, Dallas, and Fort Worth, to Austin, down to San Antonio. And through our TxSTIC efforts, we're actually expanding, or should be expanding, into some of our rural districts here in the very near future. Some ones that would come to mind that have been really progressive in looking at TIM and training has been our Atlantic district, our Tyler district, and our Bryan district. And so we're looking at bringing them on board sometime in the near future as they continue with their TxSTIC efforts and getting people engaged. Next slide. You're gonna have to advance to get the videos. I did some animations. I apologize for that. So we're training in the classroom, but also we're training in the field, and just continue to advance. There should be 4 pictures that show up. So on the top right, top left, that training was actually conducted in the Houston area, League City, I believe. The one on the right was done in El Paso. One on the bottom left, that's a tabletop exercise done in San Antonio. And then for the last 9 months, as we've been stuck in this pandemic, we've had to move to a virtual training. So Texas is one of the few states in the nation that actually requires police officers to get the training in the academy. And when I say the training, the traffic incident management training in the academy. And this became a requirement April 1st of 2020. Well, since it wasn't a previous requirement, what we found is we didn't have that many instructors who could actually teach. And so we've been doing several train the trainer courses to get instructors certified to teach in their respective academies and with their agencies. And then let's go to the next slide. And same thing here, but training is not reserved just for the classroom. These pictures here, these are large scale training exercises. One was held in Fort Worth, the other in Austin. And these were done it with partner agencies. The ones on the right, that was actually done at a towing company in the Fort Worth area. The ones on the left, that was done at the Austin Fire and Police Academy. They have a joint academy in Austin. And, this is kind of temporary until we get our own training site here in the state of Texas, something we've been talking about and really hope that we can get done. I think there's only 2 states, Tennessee and Colorado, maybe, that have traffic incident management training sites where you can actually put on these large scale events. But it really does help, clearing our roadways quicker, because these firefighters, they have all this specialized equipment that they don't get to use and train with that often. And so when you get to go out there and work together and everybody sees how complicated these incidents can be, all the resources you need, it really brings into that sense of continuity and teamwork and collaboration, promotes communication, and we actually work things much quicker and more effectively, which is what we want. Next slide. So let's talk about some of the technologies that are available. So these are 2 pictures. Well, they look like pictures, but they're actually reproductions from the UAS. So basically the way this works is the UAS flies, it captures all these millions of data points as it flies a pattern, and then they put it into the software. Most of them use Pix4D, and this is what is reproduced from that. And then they can actually zoom in and look at skid marks and other things at these scenes. And Amelia, if you'll continue to advance, because the one on the right is going to blow up, and I really want you to see the detail that comes into play. And this is all done using UAS and the software that they use as well. And talking to some of the agencies, it takes about 15 minutes to fly a crash scene of this size. And when you think about using a total station or other technologies that have been used in the past, you're cutting down the mapping time of your scene significantly. You're going anywhere from 15 minutes, where it used to be maybe 2.5 hours, depending on how many points you had to shoot and click and document. So, we really want to make sure that people are using technology, and we've seen there's some great benefits. It doesn't, end everything, but it is a really great enhancement to our program and definitely opens up our roadway quicker. TxSTIC's actually partnered with the Department of Public Safety here in Texas, and we actually purchased 32 UAS for their agency last year. And so DPS is really progressive in this program. So next slide. And if you'll continue to advance, we got some more pictures that'll pop up. So I believe as Al who mentioned earlier in the presentation that we had a police officer and a textile worker struck in a work zone over the weekend. Unfortunately, this is a trend that we're seeing happen more and more across not just Texas, but across our nation. And I'm just going to say this, it's kind of cool to see these agencies actually taking responsibility and really stepping up to the plate to not only protect their workers out there, but to protect the citizens who are actually striking us. So this is a program done in Grand Prairie, and we actually highlighted this on our bi-monthly TIM call that we had, I think it was last Wednesday. So when they were looking at their blocker vehicles and started looking at the research of what happened to the drivers that actually struck their big red trucks out there on the roadways, over 90% of those folks that struck their trucks resulted in fatalities. And so they wanted to protect their workers, but they also wanted to protect the people that were striking their vehicles. So everybody goes home. That's actually our motto for our TIM program is everybody goes home. Whether it's the roadway user or whether it's the workers out there, everybody goes home. And so they added these crash attenuators. They can actually take a side impact as well. And then they have these large arrow boards. And they're truly concerned about the people that are striking their vehicles as well as the workers, and they want to make sure that they're protecting everybody. So I do want to give you a little more information on this. So these are repurposed fire trucks. They're going to be decommissioned, and they just re-outfitted them with these large arrow boards. There's also some other lighted arrow boards on the sides and these attenuators, and it's about a $30,000 investment. And when you look at the service that they provide, I mean, that's a pretty good bang for your buck. So that covers our innovations and our technologies. But we really want to know, how are we doing? Are these things making a difference? Are we clearing our roadways faster? Is the training making a difference? So there are some gaps. And so I'm going to ask Amelia Hayes with FHWA to come on and talk about some of the data that we're trying to gather and why that is and what FHWA recommends. So Amelia, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, David, for speaking to all of that, the training, the technology, and the innovations that are currently going on in the TIM program. Like David said, my name is Millie Hayes, and I'm with the FHWA Texas Division. I'm a Safety and Traffic Operations Specialist. And David asked me to speak a little bit on TIM data because this is a huge FHWA push for several years ago and then currently. So TIM data collection has been an emphasis within FHWA for several years, going back all the way to EDC 4. So that's for the folks who were in the STIC back then, 2017 to 2018, TIM data was one of the innovations. Obviously, we talked about crowdsourcing and different data sources. Obviously, data has continued to change since that time, and there's more and more to collect and more ways to do so. So data can both improve the performance or improve the program and increase the transparency. So I'll talk a little bit about the first one, which is improving the program. And Amelia, can you please do the next slide, please? Sorry about that. And it's really weird to have another Amelia on the phone. It's freaking me out this whole time. So for that first larger bullet point is the data improving the TIM programs. For understanding the current performance, this really means measuring things like response times and clearance times in secondary crashes, and I'll talk more about that in the next few slides. For identifying data improvement opportunities, really by analyzing our data, we can determine where to focus our training. Like David mentioned, we could maybe identify that we need to possibly change some resources or change some operational processes that are out there in the field. For estimating benefits, we can determine that we had maybe a reduction in secondary crashes, or we had fewer resources dispatched. And since they weren't dispatched, they weren't able to respond to other incidents. We can do a lot with that as well. Next slide, please. So our agency has recommendations for TIM performance measures, and those are to collect the roadway clearance time, the incident clearance time, the secondary crashes, and then the responders struck by. This last one, like Al had mentioned and like David had mentioned, this has been a huge emphasis in the past year or two. Nationally, this has gotten a lot of attention from our FHWA headquarters. Some agencies collect more performance measures that are mentioned there, but I'm just really gonna hone in a little bit more on especially the first two bullet points here. Next slide, please. So in the previous slide, I had recommended that roadway clearance time and the incident clearance time. So unless you're a first responder or very active in your TIM team, or maybe you work in your traffic management center, your TMC, these might be new to you, so stick with me because we're gonna walk through it. This diagram is the TIM timeline, and it's the various milestones that occur over the course of an incident. So T0 is when the incident occurs. So that would be when a vehicle crashes into another vehicle, a vehicle stalls in the lane, etc. T1 is then when the agency first becomes aware of it. So a 911 dispatcher is aware of it by someone calling in to 911, or TxSTIC can be informed about it via the traffic management center. So T2 is then when the incident is verified. So sometimes it takes a few minutes to confirm on the TMC camera that there is indeed an incident and where it is. So then T3 is when units are dispatched out to the incident location. And then T4 is when responders arrive at the scene. So time passes as responders work to clear the scene. And then T5 is when the lanes are reopened. So the incident is removed from the lanes. It could be pushed, pulled, or dragged off to the shoulder. From there, responders may start to leave the scene. And then T6 is when the last responder leaves. And T7 is when the normal traffic flow returns. So typically T0 and T7 are the most difficult to know. At the TMC, the operators aren't usually watching in an exact camera at the exact moment when a crash occurs. So they also aren't usually monitoring when traffic is back to normal, since probably there's been another incident that they started monitoring since then. So T1, T5, and T6 are really the most important ones here because they're used to calculate that roadway clearance time and the incident clearance time. So again, roadway clearance time is the time between that T1 and T5. And then the incident clearance time is the time between the T1 and T6. Next slide, please. So where is Texas in tracking these times? Candidly, currently we don't have that much. Every summer, FHWA meets with each of the TIM teams. So we have 6 metro areas here in Texas, and it's called the annual TIM self-assessment. So every year we do this for each geographical area, and every year we're scoring really the lowest in that performance measures section. So that's again our roadway clearance time and our incident clearance times. And that's really because at the end of the day, we lack the T1, T5, and T6 from the timeline. And our crash report form, this CR3 that many of you are very familiar with if you're in safety, that is currently lacking fields for all of the times that are listed on this slide. And we're also finding that TMCs via TxSTIC's Lone Star system are not always accurately capturing and recording the T0 and T1. So where is everyone else with this? Many states are also struggling in this whole thing. Some are making statewide improvements. California is using their California Highway Patrol CAD system to get the incident clearance time. Jeff will be talking about something very similar to this in the next slides. Florida is tracking all of the recommended performance measures, and they report these quarterly. They're also making improvements in Indiana, Ohio, New Hampshire, and South Carolina. And for secondary crashes, it's really Arizona and Tennessee who are leading the way. They've been tracking a lot of this before, and they're also continuing to track the struck bys. In Arizona, they were already tracking a lot of that and had expanded to start collecting the responder type and discipline even. So they're definitely ahead of the game with respect to that. So again, this isn't just about using tracking performance measures just to track things and because FHWA said so. That first slide that I had talked about, the transparency and really accountability to the public in the program. And some states are also using the data to get more resources for their TIM programs. So Arizona was able to use the data to justify adding some more FTEs for their TIM program. And in Utah, they were able to justify funding for additional incident response vehicles. So any of these can be used to say, here, look how we've improved. And please give us more resources. So thank you for your time. I'm now gonna switch over to Jeff, and he's gonna speak a little bit more about the data collection and how all of this could be done.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Millie. Thank you, David. So one of the things that David and I have discussed, and this was something that also was briefly touched on back during the EDC4 was the possibility of integrating CAD information or computer aided dispatch information from police departments into the traffic management centers to help not just collect some of this data that Millie was speaking of, but also to help the operators at the traffic management centers identify incidents faster, as well as to help in terms of identifying what's needed out there in order to address the incident to clear it faster. If you could advance to the next slide, please. As both Millie and David mentioned, CAD provides a lot of these FHWA timeline pieces that could be used to better assess how our systems are performing, such as detection, verification, dispatch, when units arrive and when they clear out. Usually one of the first things that someone would do in the event of a crash is they will call 911. They're not calling the traffic management center necessarily. So 911 is usually the closest thing to incident, probably the closest thing to when the incident actually occurred, even before it's detected. That phone call is the start, pretty much. And one of the things that we were looking at is we're looking at different crashes and looking at some of the data from the traffic management centers throughout the state. We were noticing that about on average that law enforcement dispatch is aware of crashes usually about 15 minutes before the TMC becomes aware of it. If dispatch could inform TMC of an incident, TMC staff can actually begin assessing what response is needed before the police department arrives. And they have the cameras there to be able to zoom in on the scene and try to possibly identify, does somebody look injured? How many lanes are being taken up? Does a fire truck perhaps need to be dispatched out? A couple EMS units to transport the injured. If you're waiting for a law enforcement to come, in some cases, you might be waiting for the next available officer who may not be able to get there for another 20, 25 minutes because they're busy working another scene. So the idea here is that, can we connect these two police departments and the folks at the traffic management centers in order to get this information to folks faster? Currently, there are issues that we're trying to deal with because there are some definite challenges into making this happen. Although we think we have an idea of how to possibly facilitate this process. Next slide, please. One of the things that we noticed, go back one, please. So one of the things that we noticed, looking just at the 6 metro areas in the state, major metro areas with TMCs, there are over 100 law enforcement agencies potentially that need to be coordinated. And Dallas-Fort Worth probably has about half of them. It's not just the sheriff's departments, but every single individual burg that a freeway crosses through. In addition, not everyone uses the same dispatch system. We identified about 15 different systems that are currently used by various police departments throughout the state. One of the ways that they want to connect some of these systems with the TMCs is through a process called center-to-center integration, which is it's a lot more complex. You'd be connecting essentially a police department to the TMC. And again, we're potentially working with 100 throughout the state. That could be very time consuming and also very costly. We also, in looking at this as a possibility, that we found that there were a lot of mixed reactions to sharing some of this police data with the TMCs. And a lot of that is a partial misunderstanding about certain standards called Criminal Justice Information System standards, or CJIS standards. The understanding of what information is actually allowed to be transmitted and what is considered to be sensitive information. I mean, we talked to several police departments who we explained the information needed, and there was just no question because we're just looking for where a crash occurred and certain timestamps. They thought it was fine. I've talked to other police departments where I just asked them, what system are you using? And they wouldn't tell me because they thought that was against the standards. So there's a lot of misunderstanding there. And so the proposed solution that, in talking with David and talking with Joe Hunt and the traffic group, we think and this is something that is being worked on out of the TTI office out of Arlington, a possible simple way of transmitting this information from the CAD systems to all the various traffic management centers and maintaining security to ensure that no sensitive information gets out. Next slide, please. So what this system does is essentially we're working with the various CAD systems out there. And what we want to do is have these systems create a specific report that basically provides information, basic information, just what agency is sending it, so we know who we're dealing with, an incident report ID. And one of the reasons for this is something to index by and also correlates with the incident report ID on the CR3 crash form. This way we can not just have the crash information, but we also have how the crash was handled in terms of the timeline. Also the incident location and the various timestamps. We are not interested in any personal information. We don't need names. We don't need the addresses of the drivers involved. We don't need phone numbers, driver's license, etc. So this system would not contain any of that information whatsoever. The way this routine would work is that each of these CAD systems should have a feature that creates simple reports. Essentially, you'd say, show me all the incidents that occurred on a certain day. And so you can say a report that would say, this is the report, this is where the incident, this is the report, this is the incident where it occurred, this is the time it was called in, this is when an officer was dispatched, this is when the officer arrived there, this is when the officer cleared out, this is when the incident closed. Very simple set of information. Again, no private information provided. Such a report would be generated, and all these CAD systems have that same information that they can send. And they could just set the report off all the same way. And the system, what we'll do is they'll just create a flat file report of these data and send it out like once every 1 to 2, possibly 5 minutes at the very most. That information would be sent to a secure central FTP site. There would be a separate program located where the FTP site is, or associated with the FTP site. And what it would do is it would look at each of the individual reports that come in and be able to say, here's a report that was sent in by Pasadena's police department. Well, this one goes to Houston. This one came in from Arlington. Well, this one's going to go to Fort Worth. And so it'll be able to read which reports are coming in, and it will send it out to the appropriate traffic management center. Because these reports will be running every minute or two, anytime a timestamp is updated in the middle of the for a certain incident, that timestamp would be then resent to the TMC to show that additional activity has occurred. So you could be tracking all this information as the incident goes forward. The idea at first is that this information would be initially displayed on a secure website for the TMCs to review. There would be potential for integration into systems such as Lone Star or RIMS. And these data could also be used for analyzing how incidents are being handled, how our incident management systems are operating, and how they could possibly improve. This approach probably be far less costly than the earlier mentioned center-to-center approach. It would be rather simplistic in comparison as well. And we feel that it would also, in working with the police departments, that we could, be not too invasive in everything in terms of the connectivity between the two. And hopefully one day we can get things going in the opposite direction too, where we can have the information from the traffic management centers going to the police departments as well. But at least as a start, we feel that this is a possibility that is being tested currently again in Arlington, and that we'd like to see this at least carried out in 2 different traffic management center areas to make sure that it could be done from multiple metropolitan areas for a single system, and then hopefully carried out throughout all 6 areas and possibly even the whole state if possible. That's essentially all I have about what we're proposing. And I'm going to send this back to David.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Millie. And Shelley, that concludes our presentation. If we have time for questions, or if there are any, I think we can take them at this time.
Yes, we definitely have time for questions if anybody has any now. And the other proposal I would have is we can initiate our break now, and we can continue to have Q&A during that break for some people if they want to put a question in the chat. I mean, we'll stand by here for a second if people, in case somebody's typing. But I did notice that we can move up our 2:40 talk to as early as, looks like 2:25. Let's see, where are we? Yes, we can do 2:25 there, or if y'all wanted a shorter break, we can abbreviate that. But it seems like 2:25 would be appropriate. Does anyone have any questions? You can either you can type your chat, or you can speak up. We had trouble seeing the raised hand earlier of someone who tried to speak that way, but we're trying to look for that. Okay, Darren has a question. So back to training facilities. What is more effective, one centralized location in Texas or identification of several across the state feasible? And what about TEES, T-E-E-S, do they have tie-in to this?
So that's a really good question. That's actually something we've actually spoke about when we look at a training site for Texas. Where would it go? Because Texas is so big, and you have a lot of huge areas. So I don't have an answer for that, Darren, but it is something that we've discussed. Something that we've looked at is maybe a joint facility with the Department of Public Safety, which is in Florence, which is kind of central Texas, easy accessible from Austin and Waco and Dallas-Fort Worth and similar points. And I'm sorry, what was the second part of that? Who's the other agency involved?
He said TEES. To speak to your question, you're welcome to do that if you think it would help clarify.
Is that TxSTIC maybe?
Yeah, I mistyped.
Okay, so there's not a lot of tie-in with TxSTIC currently. I know they teach some of the 4-hour traffic incident management training. So that's one partner and another resource for us, but we've not actually partnered with them at this time.
And I just add to the, just consideration if it's not a part of what's been being developed, the idea of electric and autonomous vehicles and what those mean in traffic incident response. There'll be some unique components of that.
Yes, make note of that, sir, and we'll look into that. And I'll reach out to. Do you have a contact at TxSTIC maybe that you could send me that I can reach out to?
I'm sure we can find one.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Darren, and for being willing to help David. Does anyone else have any questions? Looks like Sean is posting some information there in the chat. Feel free to check that out. And I think we can go ahead and take a break now and reconvene for the strategic workforce development topic at 2:25. Feel free to continue chatting here. And it looks like Brian has one before we go. It's an important question. Do the other MPOs host TIM training like NCT COG And does that model work for other areas of Texas as well?
So the Houston area, they have the Houston Galveston Area Council. They have a similar training program. Currently it's put on hold like most other folks with the COVID shutdowns. We do share that as a best practice to have that ongoing training. And we're actually trying to do that with our virtual training at this point. We set up 4 virtual training classes for May currently. 2 are daytime. We have a weekend class available and an evening class. Since folks are not training as much during the pandemic, at least classroom training, but yes, Houston Galveston Area Council, they do that. San Antonio, I believe, is trying to work on one as well now that they have the CMAQ funding. And but yeah, the COG and the HGAC are the only 2 that currently have those programs, but we do share that as a best practice.
Did that answer your question, Brian? Awesome. Okay. So if there are any other questions, again, feel free to put them in the chat, even as we are on break, because we can address them when we return. And with that, please take a stretch break, get you some coffee, anything you might need, water. And thank you for being here this far. And please come back to learn more about the strategic workforce development and resiliency that we're dealing with here in Texas. Thank you. So what I will say is now, if Ray is ready, it looks like we have his presentation up and we can begin our discussion on strategic workforce development. Are you ready?
Okay, I'm ready, Shelley. You hear me?
Wonderful. Yes, sir. And I can see you. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you, Shelley. Go ahead and Millie to the next slide, please. What I'd like to do is just give a little bit of background first about the project origin, how it started. We actually made this proposal to the STIC before ED6 was announced. And it's funny that what we're actually doing under this particular project, innovation project came from the STIC, is actually in alignment with ED6 strategic workforce development. I'm a member of the development implementation team for ED6 strategic highway. And we're looking not only at the national level, what we could do with that particular project that Kirk talked about earlier, but also how we can bring it back down to the local levels, just not in Texas, but in other states as well. This just kind of gives you a quick snapshot of what the different tasks were for the project itself when we put the application up. Next slide. The first thing was actually go out there and do some research. And what I did was I went through numerous counties and I downloaded over 120 job descriptions from various counties and cities across the state of Texas, as well as the state auditor's office, American General Contractors, Society for Human Resource Management. And I took a look at what can we do to actually develop job descriptions for the counties that are out there. I developed a team of 10 actually subject matter experts to help review those. And while I was going through the process of downloading and talking to HROs in the various counties, you know, I also asked them, what is the current state of your county and the use of job descriptions, best practices and everything like that. And I captured that data to be able to come up with a marketing plan and how we get that out there. Okay, that was our first task and that's been completed in full. Next slide, please. The next thing was actually get that group. Like I said, of the 16 human resource officers contacted, 10 of them and AGC said, yeah, we'll look at what you come up with. So they had some ideas when I sent the job descriptions back out to them, implemented those recommendations they made across the board, documented everything that was there, and they gave some really good input into what we could do in task 3. So task 2 for this, which was the key stakeholder and partner identification, this is completed in full, but I still keep this group. They're very still involved as key stakeholders in the project. Next slide, please. What I went in was I built a matrix and it came up with a total of 19 job descriptions at the very beginning out of the 120 that were looked at, and built very comprehensive job descriptions for equipment operators 1 through 4, operators that generally run like a road crew. There's different words that we use, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But at the counties and cities, they usually call them equipment operators. But for the foreman 1 or 2, the supervisors, truck drivers, mechanics, traffic and sign workers, and construction maintenance inspectors. Next slide, please. These were built so they could be edited and modified by the end user. In the job description itself, there's a summary of functions. This is what you're going to do. A distinguishing characteristic is what sets apart an equipment operator 1 from an equipment operator 2, and then a 3 or a 4. We wanted to look at job duties and responsibilities, minimum qualifications, licenses, certification, special requirements, KSAs, or knowledge, skills, and abilities in the physical environment, and other information. This was in addition to that, training was developed for each job description and a matrix developed. And the training is either through through LTAP, that is instructor led. We tapped into AASHTO TC3, which is the Transportation Curriculum Coordinating Committee, everything that is web-based, and it is free again also for the cities and counties that use it. And we develop core resources that align with the TxSTIC mission for no cost to the cities and counties. They recommended that we place all this information into a handbook or a guide. Now, we followed that advice to date, and that book was published first at the beginning of February. I have delivered over 500 hard copies at two conferences in Texas. And every single time that they've taken these books, these are county commissioners, county human resource officers, county judges, they're saying, this is exactly what we've been needing for years. They have never had the opportunity or the resource to develop good, solid job descriptions. Because let's keep in mind, of our 254 counties in the state of Texas, only about 80 actually have a true human resource officer. The rest of the counties are very rural in their application, or they run in a lean environment and they have somebody else doing the job. And basically all they're engaged with is payroll and benefits. They're not doing any true HR functions. So the team also said, develop a crosswalk for job titles and a FAQ, or frequently asked questions on this section of the job descriptions. And we did that. And that goes into the book also. The crosswalk will say, like, if a county calls in a person a roadway technician 1, that the crosswalk will identify them as an equipment operator 1, or some other titles that are throughout the continuous use. Next slide, please. The final product was actually put into this book. That's the 500 copies have been talked about, and it's been marketed out there that I'm going to talk about in task 4. But it is on the LTAP website. It's in the library and workforce development. And we've had several counties and cities go out there and grab these job descriptions and have downloaded them, because we've told them it's your job description. There's places in the document when they download to take the the LTAP logo off and actually put their county or their city logos in. And they're really, really starting to use that. Okay, next slide. There's been a lot of outreach, and this is going to continue to go on through August 1st of this year that we're in. The first 4 accomplishments was a human resource contact was identified for each county. Took a lot of phone calls, took a lot of research, but I built a contact for who to send this to for every single county. And that was blasted out on January the 25th with the guide attached in PDF format. I went to the VG Young Institute of Government for Counties conference in February and distributed about 130 hard copies there. Next slide, please. We've done some Zoom meetings with the Texas Association of Counties, with the 4 regional HR and risk managers. They're also actually referring TAC, the Texas Association of Counties, are referring people back to us and the LTAP Center for any help they need with modifying the job descriptions and the training that we've developed. Emails have gone out. This gives you a timeline of the different places that have been contacted and things like that. We've also reached out to all county judges and commissioners. We've also reached out to all city and county road administrators, and also all city managers and administrators as well. Next slide, please. The guide was sent out to all the contacts with the Texas Association of County Engineers and Road Administrators, to Sarah. Contact has been made also that they have asked for us to present this project and how it can be used at their conference in the fall. Arrangements have already been made also with the West Texas Rural Counties Association to present in October of 2021. This came back from last week, the West Texas Judges and Commissioners Conference. I made a presentation at that conference in the commissioner track. There were over 200 commissioners in attendance at that particular presentation. And as a result, I had 15 come to me specifically, give me their cards after the presentation, said, you need to come to my county. Call me a week from now, and we will get you on our Commissioners Court agenda. We need to do this in our counties. The beauty about that is 10 of the counties we have never touched before with an LTAP project. So this will be our first outreach going into those particular counties. We're also going to be hitting the South Texas and the North and East conferences later this year. We'll be hitting the Texas Association County Legislative Update in Austin. And then I'm on the schedule to speak at the Far West and also at the Texas Municipal League Annual Conference in Houston. And then pending also for the American Public Works Association Conference in October. Next slide, please. Some other deliverables that are going on as far as the marketing outreach. A one-page handout has been developed and given to the hands of all LTAP instructors. And they hand this out in every single class that they touch. So not only are we touching the decision makers at the counties and cities, we're also touching the people who do the work. So they can push it upstream if they need to within their city or county. Because sometimes they get these emails, they don't read them at the decision level maker. So sometimes we help push those things up. An article was published and it went out in the winter edition of the winter 2021 Better Roads, Safer Roads. That's been distributed digitally to all commissioners and county judges across the state of Texas. And that particular magazine has been also distributed out at the conferences. We're going to be continue to do emails and calls. This is our task come forward on it. Okay, next slide, please. On-site technical assistance. I've been up to Wichita County twice, and they have developed a full-blown program for their county. They are taking our job descriptions that were developed. They're making some minor changes to them to mirror what they have there as far as position assignments. They had very basic job descriptions, and it was approved by the full Commissioners Court. I met with Ector County when I was out this last week also, and they're wanting to do that. I actually have visits scheduled already with Williamson County, Hunt County, San Patricio, San Saba, Lampasas, Burnett, Kendall, all in the next 2.5 weeks that'll be going on site. And now I get to add the other 15 that I picked up from the conference last week. So everything is really picking up a lot of steam and it's going quite well. They've been very, very receptive into the counties about this project. Next slide, please. Task 6 was developing an interim project report. That was completed back on February the 15th and it's been sent to TxSTIC's RTI. It has attachments. It gives a very detailed analysis of some of the challenges that the counties have and how we're able to actually mitigate those challenges that they have to integrate and develop or have good job descriptions. Next slide, please. Task 7, validation of the product. This is actually starting to occur. Wichita County suggested, hey, there's 2 more job descriptions that we need. We need a summer hire / general laborer 1 and 2 job description. And as a result of that, and there was room within the project to actually do this, we are doing those particular job descriptions for the counties, and we'll be putting them up on the websites and making it happen for everybody. The recalibration will have to do with if there's any validation that we need to do, and then task 9 will be a final report. Next slide, please. We're getting the business from the contacts at the conferences. The counties are hungry. They want to train their folks. They need help from the technical services that we're doing this project. And they're already asking, if I don't do it now in the next few months, will this service still be available? Well, that's to be determined for follow on, past the life of this project itself. But we're getting a lot of compliments. And like I said, they're saying this is what we needed. We're also going into other audiences with this project and for the LTAP as a whole, with the Texas Municipal League regional meetings, the Texas Municipal League Human Resource Association, and the Texas State Human Resource Association as well. Next slide, please. I kept it short and sweet. Questions?
Hi, Ray, I have a question for you. It's a rather brief question. Basically, I was just wondering, did you notice any behavioral differences with participants and involvement in this project, either during, as a result of COVID impacts or the recent weather event we had in February?
Yes and no. The project, kicked off in October, and the first few months was totally distant because it was research that I was doing from here. I did some Zoom meetings with my subject matter experts and HROs. They were great to participate in that. Now, on the training side of the LTAP, it's tied into this project, things are pushed down a little bit, but things have really picked up since then. The conference that we did in Bryan back in February, there was about 300 attendees. The conference last week, there were 83 counties represented with numerous commissioners, multiple commissioners in the same county, and I think over 30 judges were there from the counties as well. So people are getting back out and they're hungry. They're saying, come help us. We want to be trained. We need to be developed. We understand the life cycle of what this project's bringing. In order to get the work done on the road, we know it starts with our people. They have to be developed. Well, first attracted. They need to be trained. We need to retain them through coaching and mentoring. We need to have a succession plan, and then we can actually get the work done out there. So it was slow from last year, but it's really picking up now.
That is really good to hear. And I don't know if you saw because you were talking, but Al had a comment on the commendable work you've been doing. He said, great work, Ray and Tex LTAP. He's hoping that this work can be shared with the National LTAP Association so other centers can benefit from this work and also adapt it as they need for their organizations.
That's the decision naturally of Brian Sims, executive director there for UTA over the LTAP project, but I'm sure Brian is totally on board with that. So yes.
Well, thanks, Ray, for your presentation. And it's good to hear how things are going, that it's on, well, getting better, as you said, than it was last year. And it seems like we had, I don't see any other comments right now, but several people do have to leave at 3. So I figure if we do have anyone else that has questions after, they can stay on. And now we can move on to Jeff Neal and discussing resiliency. And this is a very visually stimulating presentation. I look forward to hearing it from you, Jeff, and thank you for coming.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Shelley, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today regarding resiliency efforts underway. I think this is a terrific forum where resiliency can be discussed and pondered for its enormous implications and certainly need for innovation and cooperation across many different sectors within transportation and within planning. Amelia, if you can go ahead and advance to the next slide, please. And I think you'll see this immediately when we talk about right now what Federal Highway Administration has defined when it comes to resiliency. We show this as the ability to anticipate, prepare for, and adapt to changing conditions and to withstand, respond to, and recover quickly from disruptions. So while certainly we pay a great deal of attention to these major events that cause disruptions or damage to the system, it really is a great deal more than that, as I'll demonstrate. If you'll go to the next slide, please. So, of course, major events really are the big ticket item, certainly what draws the most attention to this particular subject. By the numbers, in fact, Federal Highway Administration has been recording the effects of billion-dollar disasters nationwide since 1980. They've been looking at wildfires, tropical storm landfalls, major severe weather events when it comes to thunderstorms, tornadoes, derechos, a lot of other major topics that are involved here. And so since 1980, we have had 285 disasters that have costed more than $1 billion in overall damage and economic disruption over the course of that time. The overall accumulated cost of those disasters, $1.875 trillion. So certainly these impacts are of a major concern in trying to keep our transportation system as resilient and durable as possible. Just last year alone, there were 22 such billion-dollar events nationwide. That was a new record. It eclipsed the old record by 5 events. And in the state of Texas, we've actually had nearly half of all of those billion-dollar disasters over that 40-year period. The total cost in Texas has been near $300 billion. And when you look at the number of disasters that have occurred in Texas, nearly half have occurred solely in the past decade. And of the 22 events that occurred nationwide, 11 of them occurred in Texas. And you can see the distribution of those events across the country here. Next slide, please. But it's a great deal more, obviously, than just those events. And we are, as a result of the FAST Act and as a result of recent rulemaking, we're very much involved with TxSTIC, with our local governments in trying to support improved pavement and bridge condition on our national highway system facilities. Just recently, we went through an exercise to evaluate whether or not we should support statewide pavement and bridge targets identified by TxSTIC or develop our own. And it's, certainly when it comes to the fact that there are a significant number of off-system NHS lane miles across Texas, that really does bring on a great deal of responsibility to MPOs and local governments for us to do our part in helping TxSTIC ensure that when it comes to looking at percentage of pavements and bridges in poor condition or those approaching poor condition, that we try to help out as best as we can. In North Texas, we're doing that as a result of a regional infrastructure program that we've developed as a result of responses to COVID-19, helping local governments address their NHS pavements, the off-system NHS pavements that are in poor condition. And it was in 2019 that our region was awarded an infra grant, helping TxSTIC to address multiple bridges within the North Texas region that are in poor condition, helping them either replace, remove, or reconstruct those locations. And the more that we can help out with that, we certainly want to do so. Next slide, please. And this is even more important when we start expanding the look at resiliency to the transportation systems that our local governments have to operate and maintain. Just in the top 10 most populous North Texas cities alone, their street improvement programs, whether it's via bond or CIP, exceed $1.6 billion in expenditures. And while, because we are a growing area, Texas continues to grow significantly, a lot of those expenditures are directed toward expansion, but you're seeing more increasing funds over time being directed toward preservation. The thing is, as a result of these enormous stressors on our system, whether they be severe weather, travel demand, utility relocations, or impacts or other incidents, it's been very difficult to maintain good condition. And we need more data, we need more resources to determine exactly why it is that asset deterioration rates are increasing. You can see that both in these examples for the city of Dallas and the city of Irving, more funds need to be expended, significantly more funds need to be expended every year in order to make sure that pavement condition just remains as good as it is, even more so than how much it would take to actually improve conditions over time. So this, this area certainly is an area for great breadth and responsibilities. Next slide. I think it goes even further when you take a look at certainly the president's proposed infrastructure bill, the expansion of the definition of infrastructure, what it means, and the fact that this goes well beyond transportation into many different realms of planning, and trying to find opportunities where we're not just trying to bounce back or restore conditions as they were, but using these opportunities to bounce forward, so that whether it's disruptive events like severe weather or some of these long-term implications of the way communities developed and how in certain areas for various reasons and because of their impacts to specific vulnerable populations, how can we work harder to make sure that we're improving communities for everybody's benefit, and ensuring that transportation is a major part of that effort. So you can see in terms of innovation, workforce, data, a variety of aspects that have already been discussed today, resiliency is indeed very, very important for us to focus on. Next slide, please. All of this really began in earnest back in 2010 when the Federal Highway Administration initiated several calls for projects so that MPOs and state DOTs may conduct pilot studies. A lot of these really set the stage, set the groundwork for a lot of what we think resiliency can help us address, whether it's from vulnerability and criticality assessments of our infrastructure to identifying specific adaptation options, whether it's man-made or nature-based resiliency efforts. And then, of course, exactly what are those proxy indicators where resiliency and asset management need to overlap. Within Texas, our agency, the North Central Texas Council of Governments, as well as CAMPO, were among the first to conduct some of these initial pilot studies. But I want to focus on the most recent three that have been conducted across the state. Those performed by TxSTIC, the Houston Galveston Area Council, and the Corpus Christi MPO, and those will be in the slides ahead. Next slide, please. First of all, I certainly want to draw your attention to some fantastic work that's been conducted in the Houston Galveston area regarding the resiliency, the regional resilience tool that's been developed in that area of the state of Texas. Throughout their entire 9-county region, we now have this incredible GIS tool that allows a great visual and informative and comprehensive inspection of those roadways that after this analysis was completed, those areas that are indeed critical and vulnerable for increased investment over time. You can see here there was a pretty substantial percentage of freeways and major roads identified to be both critical and vulnerable to major events like inland flooding, storm surge, and sea level rise. And so this tool has been developed as a means to assist decision makers in ways to be able to address those situations as best as possible. Because in the end, these tools need to directly inform project selection prioritization. And we need to be able to have these visual and comprehensive tools to utilize that can be utilized for these efforts. So you can see how elevation and condition attributes may be affected over time. Are there going to be more critical and vulnerable roadway or other transportation segments as development continues in this area? How much are these locations going to be exposed to various events like flooding? And then in particular, how can we find ways to best make those critical or vulnerable areas effective or more effective when these events occur? Do we need to address them in terms of redundancy? Do we need to identify detour lengths or routes that take less time, that also won't be vulnerable themselves when it comes to response efforts? And then, of course, how can we come up with the most effective adaptation strategies to affect each particular area because of their basic conditions. There were actually, in this particular study, 25 different adaptation options that were investigated. So can we develop a means for being able to identify as best as possible how those and potentially other adaptation strategies can be applied to specific problems? And it's tools like this that are going to be of increasing importance over time. Next slide, please. And then in the Corpus Christi area, they actually were awarded funds by Federal Highway Administration for a project to be able to demonstrate the effectiveness of such measures. There's a particular facility called Laguna Shores Road, which is in of itself, as you can see from the picture here, it's at times very much threatened and even inundated when it comes to major events. And so what can be accomplished in terms of some nature-based or man-made based resiliency solutions to be able to shore up this road, assure its continued use, and to make sure that there aren't extended periods of disruption or damage when these events occur. This process is ongoing, and they're actually in the process right now of completing final design and engineering to construct some of the solutions that have been identified. And then in the several years ahead, there will be monitoring and ongoing evaluation with various performance measures just to see how these measures worked. Can they be applied to other similar locations? And then, of course, what other lessons can we, local governments, MPOs, TxSTIC, other transportation providers learn from these experiences? Next slide, please. And then the TxSTIC itself had recently completed their report looking at asset management, extreme weathers, and proxy indicators. And they were looking at this through the Houston-Galveston area once again, trying to come up with better risk estimates of infrastructure flooding, and trying to find ways to use updated FEMA flood maps and elevation profiles to show kind of the extent and intensity where areas might be affected. They were also looking at how the use of flexible pavements and other innovative materials might be impacted in terms of their serviceability over time. I think most importantly was to ensure that through this process, we might ultimately develop some kind of a life cycle cost analysis so that when we're, because we're developing transportation asset management plans, understanding the risks over time and how that is being used or how that is informing investment strategies over time is certainly going to be very critical. And some of the future work that's coming out from this actually includes a new group that I can talk about here in the next slide. And what that is a statewide resiliency technical work group. It was actually through that report from TxDOT, as well as a TTI report developing a resilient Texas metropolitan transportation system, that it was determined there was strong need and justification for this new group. We had our initial meeting in December of last year, and the idea is that it's a technical liaison group between Federal Highway Administration, TxDOT, the Texas Association of MPOs, and TTI, finding ways to not only improve our collaboration with TxDOT and our transportation partners, but also with all the work that each of us MPOs must conduct with our local government partners. Some of the survey results that were used to identify the need for this were really striking, showing that not many of nationwide MPOs that responded are going far enough in identifying the vulnerability and criticality of their systems, and even identifying what resiliency goals we must establish so that transportation plans and programs are adequately addressing those needs and what performance measures are being used. We actually have our next meeting of this group tomorrow morning from 10 a.m. to 11:30, in which we hope that At that meeting, we're going to establish some firm direction on some of the ways that we might help TxSTIC, fellow MPOs, and local governments to address resiliency on a consistent and long-term basis. Whether it's looking for ways to kind of phase this approach toward incorporating resiliency, or some kind of a framework that, whether you're a large MPO like in Dallas-Fort Worth or a smaller MPO, we can identify ways for each of us to be able to integrate these needs as best as possible. Obviously, we got to make sure that we have a strong approach and linkage when it comes to asset management. How can we best communicate and collaborate with TxDOT on helping them, and in turn helping us make sure that we're investing as much as we need to for pavement and bridge condition and other assets to be optimized. Could we provide a comprehensive portal so that resiliency data, any supporting literature, the actual tools themselves, and even specific projects like what's going on in Corpus Christi, can we provide a way to be able to have that readily available as a resource for a variety of agencies to be able to utilize? And then, of course, how can we collectively work together so that consistently, collaboratively, we're helping to identify, quantify, and prioritize these critical strategies, recovery efforts to address resiliency as best as possible. Next slide, please. And one of probably the biggest efforts that we're undertaking within the Dallas-Fort Worth area is this Integrated Regional Transportation and Stormwater Management Study. We are now a region of 7.5 million people, expected to grow to nearly 11.5 million people by 2045. And a vast majority of that new population, that new development, is going to occur in areas that are upstream from major population centers around Dallas and Fort Worth. We want to avoid a situation where, as a result of that new development, we're putting more infrastructure, more people, more land uses at risk. And we're addressing that now before the development and the intensity of these land uses to come becomes so much that in of itself, that's going to be far too much of a disruption, in addition to these increasing severe weather events over time, especially when it comes to flooding. Next slide, please. And this is necessary because just in taking a look at this section of Fort Worth over the course of 20 years, the environment is rapidly changing because we're such a strong growth state. Now, as a result of this development, we obviously must do considerable planning when it comes to transportation, water supply, and solid waste infrastructure. Often, though, those particular planning efforts are conducted within those particular silos. It's often difficult for that information to be readily shared and to understand how investments in one area or changes in another area might affect what's going on in those other sectors. But it's in stormwater and environmental infrastructure where I think that that lack of integration is most evident, because there's in many cases spotty, minimal requirements to incorporate or understand what happens when you add impervious surfaces, or as a result of that development, potential areas of water storage may be lost. And then particularly, what about accumulated watershed scale impacts? And many times, even when we are conducting our own studies to expand a roadway or add a new roadway, we're thinking about land uses and drainage and other aspects as those regions exist today. We're not thinking about the future. We're not thinking about, in many cases, areas outside of the right-of-way to a significant scale. And then, of course, even our own standards. What is a 100-year flood? A 100-year flood today is very different than what a 100-year flood was 20 years ago, and what it will be 20 years from now, because of the non-stationarity of the way water runs off developed urban landscape. And then, of course, environmentally, In many cases, that infrastructure, when you're doing negotiations, when you're trying to incorporate or enact mitigation, a lot of these things are just discussed or implemented based on individual impact by impact. It's not consistent, so there's frequent, frustration, misunderstandings of what to do and how to do it, and this kind of piecemeal approach results in in a lot of disjointed opportunities and measures to be able to address this as effectively as possible. Next slide, please. So the idea is, let's get everybody together. Let's talk, let's go across disciplines. Let's really concentrate on this silo busting to understand how all of this data needs to be addressed collectively. And that's why here you can see that we're working with Federal Highway Administration, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, FEMA, with Texas Water Development Board, flood districts, our local jurisdictions, obviously. We even have educational institutions like UT Arlington and Texas A&M AgriLife involved, so that we can try to incorporate all of these interests, all of these concerns together and do our best to truly integrate these critical forms of infrastructure that depend very much on one another. We believe we can accomplish this study with $10 million of funding. We believe we're getting close to having about $6.5 million of that available. And we're hoping that we can begin implementing this study, which we consider to be probably about 3 years in overall length, trying to get that underway sometime later this year. Next slide, please. Because we want to identify specific products and outcomes that are going to be beneficial, again, not just for transportation, but for many other sectors of development, of government. And these are some of the outcomes and products that we anticipate might be available. And the idea is all of these will be helpful for us in identifying the best, most effective decisions that improve the system, its overall functionality, and certainly ways to make sure that we're being innovative and we're being proactive in helping our communities deal with these events and other stressors to resiliency as comprehensively and most importantly, as consistently as possible. And so we're hoping that this is going to be very informative, not just for our area, but for the state at large as well. And with that, Shelley and everyone, I look forward to hearing any comments or questions you may have on this. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jeff. That was a really good presentation. And I think, honestly, you covered so much content in that presentation. I will be surprised if there are questions because it was very thorough information. But so far, I have not seen any questions in the chat. If anybody would like to speak up, you're welcome to do so. But this, as you all know, it's an important topic, and I'm glad that you went over it, Jeff. Not everyone understands resiliency and where it starts and ends. We understand it has something to do with infrastructure, right? But in general, not everybody understands the breadth of it. So I'm glad you brought it up. And I think Kirk really wanted you to bring this up here, and I think it was a good fit. And if there are any questions about resiliency, I'm sure we can do follow-up questions as well and channel them to Jeff if you have them following the meeting.
Please.
And yeah, of course. And I noticed you had quite an array of like a dream team on that last slide too. I should have noticed. I've worked with them in the past. They're pretty awesome people.
Yes, indeed.
Really good group at NCT Cog. And other than that, I mean, I didn't have any questions about what you had. I was very interested though.
I just real quick, I think, it really does have strong relevance to a lot of the things that were discussed here. Workforce development, data, all of this is interconnected. Again, this whole notion of silo busting. Before I became a planner, I was actually wanting to be a meteorologist. I kind of feel like this whole thing has kind of brought me back home, so to speak. But there again, not everybody can understand meteorology or land use planning or other things. But how can we best communicate with each other? How can we share data? How can we share experiences? So when it comes to innovation and linkages, what better than trying to find ways to use technology and workforce as a way to expand this idea.
That's a good summary as well. So yes, you're right. I mean, it did hit on a lot of our topics that we all seem to be worried about, especially, in this post-pandemic or continuing pandemic world. So I think that's great. And again, we appreciate it and the support that NCT COG has been giving you and Natalie and everyone who's willing to speak. And let me just say real quick before I dismiss everyone, if you have a topic that you think is relevant and, to what we discuss here or innovative, feel free to bring it forward. And for our next meeting, we will be trying to share innovations among the, committee members or attendees. If you have something, it needs to be, a government type project, but it can be regional, local. And I think it's important to emphasize those things that are important to your organization. So bring those topics next time and we'll be in touch. And for the non-committee members and anyone who's just attending, you're welcome to leave now. You don't have to. I just wanted to save those people who don't want to do the committee type council discussions, give them an opportunity to leave if they want to. But I'm not making you leave. But you're welcome to make any comments or questions in an email. You can send those to me or Amelia, and we'll make sure we convey those to the appropriate presenter or maybe subject matter expert or group that might pertain to. Again, thank you all for these important topics. And now we can go ahead and go to the next slide, Amelia. All right, so the purpose of the council roundtable is just to give all the council organizations, respective organizations, a chance to say, here's what we've been up to. You can just throw it out there and tell us what you want to tell us. And it's just about keeping us in the loop and sharing what you're up to. With that, we can start, we can go down and look at each council member, or you can just chime in. Not everyone has an update. I know Al had to leave and some other people might have had to drop off the call already. So it's a great opportunity. If Brian's still here, I recommend you speak up now. But Brian seems fine. Oh, there you are. Yay.
Hey, Shelley, how are you? Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. I'll be very, very brief. I just wanted to first touch on Al's comment or question that he had regarding sharing the project that Ray's working on at the national level with the national LTAP, other state LTAPs, and we're certainly going to be doing that. I will be sharing his project actually in a few weeks at the South Central regional meeting that we have of LTAP. So we are going to be sharing that with other states, that particular project, and excellent job to Ray for his presentation today. Also just wanted to briefly say that it does seem that we're opening back up as a state, at least from our perspective. We had taught in the month of March 18 in-person courses across the state, and we had trained 155 participants in those 18 courses. So we're seeing quite a bit of, we're starting to see a little bit of an uptick in requests for our services across the state in an in-person environment. So we're very proud of that, and hopefully that will increase. And that's all I have. So thank you for the opportunity, Shelley.
Thank you for hanging on to tell us. It's good to hear what you guys are up to. And I also appreciated Ray's presentation. It was good to look at that. So thank you for that. And if any other council members would like to speak up, feel free. You can talk about what you're looking forward to, what you have a question about, or if you want us to talk more about it the next time around. Anything?
Hi, Shelley. This is David Palmer, DPS.
Hi, David.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing great.
I just want to touch base. I want to comment that I really like the Tim's information and presentation. That was very informative and pretty comprehensive across the board. And with that, I wanted to add that I verified with our state crash team who's been tasked with doing a lot of training, both in DPS and external agencies, that they have been. He didn't have the numbers handy when I talked to him, but they have been teaching both the 4-hour responder course and also providing the trainer classes for new TIM instructors over the past year or so as well. Obviously, in a much more limited, I guess, setting because of COVID, but they have been doing that and will continue to do that to try to expand that, because as you guys know, DPS very strongly supports that approach. We've always, even before it was formalized, we've always tried to be real conscious about clearing roadways as quick as we can. But now that we've got this formalized process, it really has helped a lot. So I just wanted to pass that on and then just comment that presentation was really appreciated. I mean, all the presentations, I don't want to minimize any of them because they were all good and all informative. But from a DPS perspective, obviously the TIMS is kind of right close to home. That's all I have. Thank you.
Yes, sir, and thank you.
David, could you, if you're familiar with it, talk any a bit about how you guys have begun to employ drones? I know you added a number to your assets in the last year or two, and specifically for traffic incidents.
Yeah, thank you, Darren. I actually meant to touch on that and forgot, but yes, over the last year, we've purchased, man, I can't remember the number, but it was a significant number so that we could get those craft out to all of our district teams. And I know that it's been several months ago, they finally got them all distributed. I think they've got everybody trained. I'm not 100% sure on that, but it has definitely been expanded within the division in the Texas Highway Patrol. And not only are they using the drones for, obviously primarily they're for crash reconstruction and things like that, which that was another thing that I really liked in one of the presentations, touching on how big of a difference they make in them being able to map a crash scene, not only faster, but with less impact to traffic flow. In the old days, I think most of you guys know, sometimes we'd have a highway, you'd have to shut down a highway or lanes of a highway for quite a few hours to get a complex scene actually mapped and drawn. That was before we started using even the laser transit and stuff like that. And so the drones have really been a substantial improvement in being able to do that. And then in addition to the crash scenes, we've actually used them. Some of our folks have used them for, monitoring protests and, other types of activities where we've been requested to help with those kinds of things as a proactive approach to try to prevent crime. So they really have expanded our ability to be much more efficient and have less impact on ultimately traffic safety. When we're trying to investigate these crashes. Did that answer, Darren?
Yeah, and I think it'd be potentially really useful to kind of capture some of the operating procedures or SOPs you guys are developing and what you're finding from the different uses of them on incident clearance. Maybe we could package that up and make that into something we share either back through EDC or just out to all our members if they make considerations at the local level to do the same thing.
Sure, I'll do some visiting internally and let you know.
Hey, Shelley, wouldn't mind giving a quick update.
Sure.
My name is Sean Merrill. I serve as the current ASC Texas president. And recently ASC came out with their infrastructure report card. I posted a photo of it earlier. Right now I'm going to post a link to it if anybody's interested. When you go to that link, there's a brief, a few pages that you can look at, see the infrastructure report card, and there's the full report there. We had a 55-member committee that worked over a year on this infrastructure report card. And really what it does is it grades our infrastructure based on 8 different criteria: capacity, condition, funding, future needs, operation and maintenance, public safety, resilience, and innovation. And there were 12 different infrastructure categories that were graded this year. We do this every 4 years at the beginning of each presidential term so that the president can look at that. We do it both at a state level and a national level. The grades that probably pertain to this group, aviation got a B-, bridges, transit both got a B- as well. And then highways and roads got a D+. Overall, the infrastructure report card had a GPA of C, which is an improvement from last time, which was a C-. So it is kind of heading in the right direction. And this is a really good tool for anybody really to use when you go to talk with any of your legislators or your decision makers to kind of really get a really good assessment of where we're at and what are some of the asks for future funding requirements. Not only that, we are also working on a task committee to evaluate the winter storms that came through. And we know there was a lot of issues with electricity and other things. So the categories we're really looking at that is the electricity, of course, transportation, water, and wastewater systems. Right now, our ask is if anybody would be interested to serve on the transportation side of that, we're looking for anybody to serve on that task committee. We've got a couple folks, but at the end of the year, we're hoping to have a report to give to the Texas legislators to look at, to kind of evaluate what happened during the winter storms and how we can go push forward after everything that happened during those storms. And then last thing is we have our annual conference, the CECon, which is occurring on September 15th through 17th down in San Marcos. So if anybody's interested, that's also on ASC Texas website. So we appreciate being a part of this group and look forward to working with everyone.
Thank you, Sean. If you don't mind, if you could send a follow-up email maybe to me. There's a couple of people I know that already dropped off the call that might be interested in that. So I'd like to follow up with them. If you don't mind sending me an email.
That's for the committee, the task committee?
The task committee, sorry, should have specified.
Sure, that's not a problem. We'll do that.
And this is Tiffany, council member. I also want to add in there that those transportation grades are all roads, not just TxSTIC roads. So you're looking at county roads, rural areas, all the transportation in the whole state.
Which I should say is where TxLTAP comes in, right? Because it's how we can convey a lot of the information and the type of work we do on our TxDOT roads and convey that to the local governments and regional governments so they can share the training.
Because you can tell when you cross the divide.
Yeah.
It's some areas, not all, okay. But I'm the planning and zoning commissioner for my little city, and I know that, it's just hard sometimes to get the funding you need to do things. So I really appreciate the raise, sharing that information. I've already signed up for some webinars on behalf of Aledo, Texas, as the commissioner to see where we may get some help with rural funding for those types of grants. Thanks.
That's wonderful work. Thank you. Are there any other committee?
Shelley, this is Elizabeth Mao with the North Texas Tollway Authority.
Yes, we can hear you.
Just wanted to share an update on some of the work in our wrong way driver initiatives that we've been doing, found some successes recently. We have for years been using our tolled loops at our ramps and our main lanes to detect wrong way drivers, but not all of our ramps are tolled, as most agencies are not. So we were looking for another great solution for those non-tolled ramps as well as main lanes. 30 to 40% of our wrong way drivers are doing U-turns in the main lanes. So we have found a solution through a pilot for the thermal cameras. So it's not just the thermal camera detection, but we've tied them to wrong way drivers or wrong way signs that are blinking on the roadway. It's tied back to our Safety Operations Center for dispatch of needed help, as well as the DMS signs in the area. So the thermal cameras really have been a good fit for our system, and we're currently in the first phase of implementation across our entire system here at NTTA. One other one where a pilot we're starting is we have a few intersections on our system that we're piloting some innovative pavement markings that for the right way driver looks like a white stop bar, but in the wrong direction, it reads wrong way, or the arrows, red arrows are pointing the other direction. So we're real interested to see if this has any impact at intersections. So more to come.
Wow, that's very innovative. Thank you so much for mentioning that. And if there are any other council members, you're free to speak up. And if not, we can move on to Darren's closing comments.
Well, as always, I have more questions than answers.
That's good. That's good.
I mean, look, these are great. I think we'd be interested in seeing NTTA's actual construct of those wrong-way driving, because we did a lot of research on that, and we have different deployments across the state that we've examined, different setups, numbers of radars, numbers of cameras, and like she said, ties to messages or specific, unusual markings. And so it might be great to just collect all those and then work with our traffic safety division to share what everybody's identified or are using. And at some point, obviously, ideally get to some common standards that seem to work the best. So that's a great input. Every one of these is progressing very nicely. As I think about the workforce development one, I constantly think, I'd love to see this grow to not only, to contract people, but, in-house, transportation engineers and construction folks as well. What are the same kind of education, what's the information that we could share broadly across all of our agencies and not just with the contract workforce. And, the weather response one continues to develop. I think it's going to be great. They're developing the data and the capability to share that broadly across a number of systems. And I think that we and others have several systems that this information will be gladly incorporated into over time. And I think about Drive Texas and like they said, Texera. And so, just really great work that continues to happen there. What did I skip over? The resiliency one, I think clearly the dealing with flooding and hurricanes and all that is one of the greatest challenges in the state. I'd love to see that over time expanding. Mentioned fires and clearly ice events are something that's on in our recent memory. So the ability to incorporate those kinds of things into resiliency and in a longer range, and something that we're working in research areas is, what does that mean in terms of cybersecurity as well? The more we use digital systems to complement our physical assets, the idea of how, maintaining the resiliency of those systems, not only for cybersecurity, but for power and other considerations. And that kind of came up in one of the questions on the weather response one is, how did it perform, in freezing conditions, which is, one of the things we really want it to do, right? So is it resilient in that respect as well? So yeah, just really grateful for everybody's continued work on these. I think that they're really beginning to show benefit. Love to have ideas in the future on other things that we may want to see if there's another round of everyday counts. What are areas of concern that we'd like to think about, and potentially items like, as just mentioned, wrong way driving or others that maybe we want to promote and share more broadly to other states through federal highways as well.
Thank you, Darren. I think you covered everything. I can add real quick. I know we're closing remarks, but I wanted to say on the workforce development side internally at TxSTIC that we have the Civil Rights Division is working on it. And then also we have the Maintenance Division is starting to look at it through interest based on a pooled fund study. You might have heard of the No Boundaries pooled fund study. And I know that they were here for this meeting. So a lot of those people got to hear what we're doing on the TxLTAP side. And I bet you they're going to be thinking about how they can supplement that or improve it.
And I'll make a plug one more time. If this is a value, especially at the local level, at the city and county level, if you're finding these things useful, help us identify other partners of yours, other cities and counties, and how do we bring them into the STIC? Or are there other outreach areas where we could bring these to them, like a council of county members or city members, and how can we not just do this through the STIC, but through other venues as well, so that the education is shared broadly and constantly as much as possible.
Thank you. I see Kevin.
Yeah. Hi, Shelley. If I could just share, I was just informed through one of the project managers that's on the call as well, that we have an actual a new project starting up in FY22 related to wrong way driving detection. Just its overall the evaluation process itself, the operations piece of how to go about evaluating the technology as a whole. In that, we may be looking at getting more information from the person who was speaking in NTTA. Maybe we can connect them with the researchers that are doing that work as well, and maybe doing some synergy there, and coming up with a solution for evaluating all those various technologies that are out there. So just FYI.
Great. Thank you for bringing that up. And that's a good point. It might be a good opportunity for us to work together.
I'm very interested in that as well. This is Elizabeth. I'll put my information in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you. Darren, if there is nothing else, then do we have a motion to adjourn?
So motion.
All right.
Thank all of you for joining us today. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Take care.